Okay, so today we're going to discuss Man in Full, the middle section of the book, and we're going to focus much more on Conrad Hensley. Last time we tried to put together a model of manliness that had several elements to it. Athletic prowess, sexual prowess, financial success, social prominence. And we see that on each of these scores, Conrad is no Charlie. He's athletic, but not an athlete, not famous for it. He especially has big forearms. That's from work. Sexual prowess, in his case, has turned against him and has almost been the author of his doom. His marriage to Jill, giving rise to children, has put an end to his educational dreams. Financial success, none. He's saving up for a condo in a nice part of Oakland. Say that out loud. Social prominence, he's a nobody. Living in a rented apartment, his mother-in-law visits next to Leah Slaw. We're introduced to Conrad as he shows up to work in the suicide freezer unit, and he tells himself, as he's tempted not to go into work, to be a man. It's page 111 in the favored numbering. And now, what is his understanding of what it means to be a man? At this point in the book, it is underdeveloped, or I would even say undeveloped. It seems to mean something like this: exercise self-control. Do your duty, or do what's right, even if those around you don't do it. Now, when you exercise self-control, that doesn't mean you are without passions. It means you can control your passions. So there's no doubt that Conrad is in some way finding the little Vietnamese Sla attractive, but self-control means you find Leah Sla attractive and don't do anything. He is tempted not to go to work, but the exercise of self-control means you don't give in to it. This often happens. My son will say, well, that's just human nature when he does something wrong. And I'll say, what are you, an animal? That is, you're just going to give in to your nature? Or can you control your nature? And that's the way he seems to conceive of being a man. Now, there's more to Conrad and his understanding of manliness at this point, but I don't think he understands yet that there is more to Conrad and his understanding. And it's his development as a character that brings his understanding to the surface. Think of that famous incident in the suicide freezer unit where he saves the white trash guy, Kenny. Why? It's not as if he has some unaccountable respect for Kenny. It's not as if what he did was without danger. He risks his life to save Kenny. Crash and burn Kenny. Why do it? Well, because it's right. He doesn't do it because people will praise him. He doesn't do it because people will notice him. He gets a certain satisfaction out of doing the right thing. After he saves Kenny, the people in the suicide freezer are amazed at him. They'll say things like, "You are the best man in here." Page 129. "You showed something in there, kid." Page 132. He's admired, but he doesn't do things to be admired. He does things because they are admirable. And that is a huge difference. one could almost say that the goal of any moral teaching is to move someone from being admired on the one hand at first to being admirable later. Think of how we treat children. We do it something like this. When they do something right, we praise them. Why do we praise them? Because they love praise. And we can get them, we can induce them, in other words, to act properly in more occasions. Right now we're potty training Biscuit. And he's my 5-year-old. You're like the nighttime potty training. And are you dry this morning, Biscuit? Yes. Yep, way to go! You're an amazing human being. Very few people have ever made it through the night without doing that. Right? Thank you, Daddy. I'll try again tomorrow. Right? And eventually, you stop peeing your pants not because you're getting praised, but because it's the right thing to do. The hope is to move him from loving praise to wanting to be praiseworthy. Right? Well, this is something that I think Conrad is in the back of Conrad, and we'll come to the front of Conrad. He doesn't do things to be praised. He doesn't do things for the prominence that comes with it. He does something because it is right. And he'll oppose some things because they are wrong. What I'm trying to say is Conrad is beyond public opinion. He doesn't understand that yet, but he will come to understand it. And it's that realization that is central to understanding manliness. We see after the suicide freezer unit stuff that Conrad is arrested. Now, it's of course not immediately after the suicide freezer stuff. Conrad is laid off, and he suffers through a series of unfortunate events. That is, a series where fortune does not smile on him. He's almost late for a job interview. He does poorly on the typing test because of his arms. He comes out, his car has been taken. He doesn't quite have enough money. It ends with him going to seek his car. They're ruining his car, and he assaults the man who is, bending the chassis on the car? If that's how you say it, I'm sorry, I'm not a car guy. He's arrested for assault. What is the title of that chapter? This is not right. Right? He is motivated by justice. The injustice that is being done to him and being done to his property is what leads him to a confrontation with the guy in the car lot. It's not so much that, it does affect his family. It does affect him. But it's an unjust act. And he's standing up for himself. And he's standing up for justice. Now we see that Conrad is put in the slammer. And it's there where I want to pick up the story, because we can understand the difficulty he is having. The difficulty that Conrad is having is this. He does not have a language or a frame of reference that explains himself to himself. He does not have a language or a frame of reference or really an understanding of who he is. He has done something to put himself in prison. He won't confess to the crime. Conrad is offered a plea bargain. Instead of being a felonious assault, he could plead to a misdemeanor that does not have prison time. And we can all understand, I hope, the attractiveness of such a plea bargain. Conrad could keep looking for a job. Conrad would not have a felony on his record. He could be with his wife, he could be with his children, and he could be free. And no one can understand around Conrad why he doesn't simply take the deal. Right? When Jill comes to visit him in the prison, she is incredulous on this account. And so let us turn to this. It contains a very important part of the novel. For those with a favored numbering, it is on page 344 and following, but it's near the beginning of chapter 15 for those with the unfavored numbering. We see in this section of the book Conrad attempting to explain why he won't confess. And for those with the favored numbering on 344, it's in that long paragraph with the in it. Conrad's trying to figure out why he hasn't confessed. This is his first stab at articulating the reasons. Right after the Conrad has this to say. He had grown up associating religion with self-delusion and the aimlessness of adults. But now he thought about the soul, his soul, or tried to. But it was only a word. He didn't know how to give it any meaning. He had lost everything. Every cent, his freedom, his good name, every shred of the respectability he had struggled toward, even his dreams. What was there left to dream of? That's the temptation, right? And yet, there was something left. Something that caused him to care whether he lived or died, and to worry about Jill and Carl and Christy, his children. Perhaps that was his soul. Whatever it was not confined to his body and his mind. It could not exist without other people, without the only people he had left, his wife and his 2 children. So he won't confess because of some concern about some unnamed thing, which at this point might be his soul. Perhaps that was his soul. And it's in that frame of mind that his wife comes to visit him in the prison. Now Conrad is sitting next to Roto. Roto is rutting in some fashion with his girlfriend next door, all very amusing. Oh baby, oh baby, oh baby. And he's trying to explain himself. Conrad tries to explain himself to his wife. This is 5 pages later, to 349, with those that possess the favored numbering. Right in the middle of the page, his wife is kind of yelling at him, right? She's a little bit of a nag. And maybe that's not strong enough. She tries to govern him. And she looks at him as a total wimp. He's a wuss. He won't discipline the kids. And whether he's right or wrong to do that is another question. Whether she's a real prize is another question. You jumped over their fence, Conrad, she says. That was trespassing. After that, anything. She lowered her eyes and shook her head over the uselessness of rehashing it. When she looked up, she was crying once more. All right, Conrad, you were totally innocent. So what have you gained by insisting that? What did you gain by going through the trial? They were willing to give you probation. They were willing to give you a break. I don't understand you. Rhoda was going, do it, sugar, do it. No, we'll skip that. Chastened by her tears, Conrad said softly, you're right. I didn't gain anything. I didn't think any jury would ever convict me because I knew, and I still know, I was innocent, but they did, and I lost a lot, but I kept something. Jill, I kept my honor. I didn't bargain away my soul. And she just can't believe it. Your ... soul? Well, hats off to your soul. We're very proud of your soul. Did your soul by any chance stop to think about your son and your daughter and your wife? That's all I was thinking about, Conrad answers. When the time comes, I want to be able to look Carl and Christy in the eye and say, I was innocent, I was falsely accused, I refused to compromise with a lie. I went into prison, but I went into prison a man, and I came out of prison a man. A prophetic thing for him to say. Jill leaves, she's very disappointed. And he has one more reflection on why he did what he did. Now he is still stumbling, right? He can't quite explain why he did what he did. He didn't want to compromise with a lie. Well, why didn't you want to compromise with a lie? Because of your soul. And he tries to, and he starts to have doubts about what he did. A few pages later, 354 for those with a favorite numbering, right on the last paragraph that begins with there, under the italicized vulgarities. The paragraph that is under the italicized vulgarities.
Do you want me to read those?
No, I'm all right with that. I mean, I can actually say that word if I need to. A few lines down, he would have to face the horrible possibility that Jill was right. That all his posturing about principles had been nothing but that, posturing. That he had ruined his life and hurt those he loved for no other reason than to indulge his obstinate ego. In a world in which principles were dead, and that his descent into this hole, this hell on earth, had been the name of nothing but vanity and foolishness. And then he tries to explain himself to himself a little more. No, he rejects it, but this temptation is always lurking inside of Conrad during this chapter. Why did I do what I did? Should I have done it? Wouldn't I be better off? Wouldn't my wife be better off? Wouldn't my kids be better off if I had just confessed, compromised to the lie, instead of gone into prison? But now, he says it's not his soul, but it's vanity, posturing, foolishness, not to have given in. So which is it? He is still tempted, and all he can say is, like, I provided an example to my children of not compromising. It's no longer his soul that he seems to be concerned with. So how Conrad is looking for something, as I say, to explain himself to himself. He's looking for a frame of reference to understand his refusal to compromise with a lie. And it is here, through an act of providence, it seems, that he receives deliverance. That he gets an answer to his question when the wrong book is sent to him by the prison library, or by Jill. He wanted the Stoics game, and instead he got the Stoics, the collected writings of the Stoics. They tear off the front cover, they hand it to him, and he begins to read, and here's how you say his name, Epictetus. There once was a vice presidential candidate named James Stockdale. Some of you are old enough to remember him. He was Ross Perot's running mate. He had served in Vietnam and spent, I think it was 8 years, being tortured by the North Vietnamese. And while he was there, he remembered Stoic philosophy, and when he got out of prison, he wrote a book on Epictetus. And then he ran for vice president, and he's famous for being up there, and it was him and Dan Quayle and Al Gore, and saying, "Why am I here?" Right? So this was a guy who actually understood, lived, and breathed Stoic philosophy, So between him and Conrad, we have two modern Stoics. And this book, the Stoics Game, or the collected writings of the Stoics, helps explain Conrad to himself. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is to understand what Conrad learns from the Stoics. What he learns from the collected writings of the Stoics, and especially from Epictetus. And for this, I think we're in chapter 19, for those without the favorite numbering. On page 443 with the favorite numbering, that's where we'd be. It's right in the beginning of a section in the chapter after there's a little break called "The Next Afternoon at Pod Time, All Seemed Tranquil," and then there's this account of what Conrad has learned. Does anyone without the favorite numbering have that spot? If you do, just yell out the page number for everyone else. So for Conrad, the Stoics are very simple thinkers. They make one simple point. Man is not free except in forming his own character. Or one could say, except in the mind. All human beings, in some sense, are slaves. Some people are enslaved to their bodies. Some people are enslaved to public opinion. Some people are enslaved to their own ambition. Some people are enslaved to their career. Some people are enslaved to their wife or husband. A Stoic recognizes all of the things that are constantly pushing and pulling on us, and nevertheless, through an act of the will, suspends the effects of all those things and demonstrates a concern for what is right, a concern for genuine virtue. It's that suspending of all those external things that is the key to stoical freedom. Let us hear Conrad, or let's hear Wolfe, give a discussion of how Stoicism affects Conrad, how it shapes his character. That long paragraph that begins with the word Conrad sat down at a table.
411.
411 for those without the favored numbering. Mr. Winkelman, will you read that paragraph?
Sure. Conrad sat down at a table and returned to Epictetus. By now he had learned how to sit on a bolted metal stool at a bolted metal table and face the forlorn pages of the Stoics before him and shut out the rest of the pod. What Epictetus had to say was supremely simple, and he said it over and over again in different ways. All human beings are the children of Zeus, who has given them a spark of his divine fire. Once you have that spark, no one, not even Zeus, can take it from you. This spark gives you the faculty of reasoning and the will to act or not act, and the will to get and the will to avoid. But the will to get and avoid what? To get what is good, says Epictetus, and to avoid what is evil. There's no use spending your life agonizing over the things that are not dependent upon your will, such as money, possessions, fame, and political power. Likewise, there is no use spending your life trying to avoid the things that are not dependent upon your will, such as the tyranny of a Nero, imprisonment, and physical danger. Conrad nodded as he read it. Epictetus had a special scorn for those who merely tremble and mourn and seek to escape misfortune. Zeus, he cries out at one point, Send me what trial thou wilt, for I have endowments and resources given me by thee, to bring myself honor through what befalls. Then he says to his disciples, what do you think would have become of Hercules if he had not been a lion, and a hydra, and a stag, and a boar, and unjust and brutal men, whom he drove forth and cleansed the world of? What would he have done if there had been nothing of this sort? Is it not plain that he would have wrapped himself up and slept and slumbered all his life in ease and luxury? He would never have been a Hercules at all. What use would he have made of his arms and his might and his endurance and noble heart had he not stimulated and trained by such perils, had he not been stimulated and trained by such perils and opportunities?
Okay, thank you very much. So this is a wonderful summary of what Conrad learns from Stoicism, although there's obviously several other places in the book that one can turn for such a wonderful summary. So let us try to break down the various elements of Stoical philosophy as they affect Conrad. First of all, Stoicism accepts that there is some sort of body and soul distinction. And the body is a prison for what is highest and free in us. All of the things that human beings come to be concerned with, their possessions, their fear of death, sexual passion, financial success, political power, social prominence, athletic ability, all of those things are dependent on our body, which is perishable and will inevitably decline. The soul, the spark of Zeus, is what we should be concerned about. It is what is highest and most distinctively human about human beings. And what is the soul concerned with? Doing what is good and shunning what is evil. The second vital attribute of Stoicism, as Conrad puts it forth, is an extreme independence. If it is not dependent on your will, you shouldn't be concerned about it. There's nothing you can do. The things that are listed in this particular are money, possessions, fame, political power, the tyranny of Nero, imprisonment, physical danger. All of that is beyond your will. So you shouldn't obsess about it. But I want you to just understand how important this idea of independence is. Okay? Because a lot of the things that many of us no doubt believe make life worth living compromise our independence. And I only want to mention one thing right now because it'll come up and be very important in Conrad's development, and that is the idea of love, or a concern for others. I guess those are two different ideas. Love implies dependence. If you genuinely love someone, you are dependent on that person. And I don't mean simply in the way that Ratto is dependent on his girlfriend. That is, you need someone there to help stimulate you sexually. Although that does help. I'm not opposed to that. But I'm not like recommending, let's just. That particular act, and I'll call it sex, is a tip-off to what love genuinely is. That is, love is dependence on another person. Just as another person is required for sex, another person is required for love. If you are going to use the other example, care for others, if you're going to genuinely care for another human being, that means that you enter into their fortunes. If you genuinely care for another human being, and they befall some sort of extraordinary misfortune, it affects you. And if it affects you, you are not being stoical. Because you should only be concerned about that which is under the direct control of your will. So imagine this, and I'm not saying this is my view. Let's say you're walking across the street and you're a Stoic. And you see someone run over by a semi. It would be, make your day. You'd want to tell people about it. But a Stoic doesn't necessarily enter into that person's fortune. You do what's right in that circumstance, but you don't necessarily care. Because caring implies dependence on something that is beyond the direct control of your will. I hope I'm making sense. This is going to come up and be very important for Conrad's development. So my point here is simply to say that the idea of independence that is central to Stoicism runs up against love and care for others. The third element of Stoicism is that there is some sort of cosmic support for virtue. And here's all I mean by that, right? It sounds a little fancier than it is. The references to Zeus are meant